My name is Daniel Green, and I've always prided myself on my ability to sense when something's wrong. Maybe it's my background as a private security consultant, or just the way I've always observed people in situations more carefully than most. It's a skill that's saved me more than once in my professional life. But when it came to my personal life, my marriage to Olivia, I never thought I'd need that same vigilance. Olivia and I had been married for 8 years. She worked as a marketing manager for an upscale fashion brand, a job that kept her busy, but which she loved. I'd always admired her ambition and the way she could light up a room at social events. To me, Olivia was the kind of person who seemed too genuine, too steady to ever keep secrets. That belief made what happened next all the more jarring. It was a Thursday night, late enough that the world outside was quiet and still. I just finished scrolling through the news on my phone, a habit that helped me unwind before bed, when a faint vibration drew my attention. I glanced at my phone, but it wasn't the source. Across the room, Olivia's phone lit up on her nightstand, vibrating softly. The screen glowed for a few seconds before dimming again. Olivia stirred, groaning lightly as she rolled over to check it. "Just work," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded absently, watching as she slid out of bed. "I'll handle it," she added, slipping her phone into her hand and padding quietly out of the room. That in itself wasn't unusual. Olivia's job often demanded late-night attention, especially since her company had clients in different time zones. But something about the way she moved, the way she avoided looking directly at me, stuck in my mind. She was always upfront about work emergencies. This time, there was no mention of who was contacting her or why. I lay in bed listening to the soft creak of the floorboards as she walked toward the kitchen. My curiosity prickled. Then a sound reached me, her voice low and deliberate, as if she were trying to keep it from carrying too far. I sat up, straining to hear. She was talking to someone. It wasn't the clipped professional tone she used for work calls. It was softer, warmer, and there was something else I couldn't quite place. A nervousness, maybe? I slid out of bed as quietly as possible, my bare feet making almost no noise as I crept toward the hallway. From my vantage point, I could see Olivia standing by the kitchen counter, her back to me. She held her phone to her ear with one hand, the other fidgeting with the hem of her oversized t-shirt. Her posture was tense, and her voice, though faint, carried enough for me to catch snippets of what she was saying. "I can't tonight," she whispered. "It's too risky." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind immediately raced through the possibilities. What could be too risky? Was she talking about work, a friend, or something else entirely? I stayed frozen, watching as she continued speaking. There was a pause during which she nodded as if the person on the other end could see her. Then she laughed softly, a sound that would have warmed my heart under different circumstances. Now it felt foreign, like it didn't belong to the woman I thought I knew. "I'll figure something out," she said after a moment. "Just give me some time, okay?" Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor beneath the surface. I couldn't decide if it was fear, excitement, or something in between. She ended the call quickly after that, lowering the phone to her side and staring at it for a moment. Her shoulders sagged, and she let out a breath, like she'd been holding it in the whole time. I barely managed to step back into the bathroom as she turned and began walking back toward the bedroom. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline coursing through me. What had I just witnessed? Was it really what it seemed, or was my mind playing tricks on me? When I returned to bed, Olivia was already under the covers, her back turned to me. She didn't say a word, and I didn't dare break the silence. I slid in beside her, my thoughts racing. The faint scent of her shampoo, something floral and familiar, hung in the air, but instead of comforting me, it only deepened the chasm that had opened between us. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in my head. Every detail seemed to carry weight now. The way she'd left the room so quietly, the urgency in her voice, and those words, "too risky." They echoed in my mind like a warning I couldn't ignore. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I still hadn't pieced together a clear explanation. All I knew was that something wasn't right, and the woman I loved was keeping something from me. And if I was going to find out what it was, I had to tread carefully. The next morning, Olivia was her usual self, bright, composed, and efficient. She hummed softly as she moved around the kitchen, pouring coffee and fixing her usual breakfast of Greek yogurt with granola. To anyone else, she would have seemed perfectly at ease, but to me the cracks in her performance were glaring. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, flashing me a quick smile as she set a steaming mug of coffee in front of me. I nodded, forcing a smile of my own. "Yeah, fine." She didn't press further, and I couldn't tell if she was distracted or just trying to avoid prolonged conversation. Either way, her indifference felt like a confirmation of my suspicions. Something was off and she didn't want me to notice. I spent the day preoccupied, the memory of the phone call replaying in my mind. At work, I found myself staring blankly at my computer screen, barely able to focus on the tasks at hand. My colleague and best friend Marcus noticed my distraction during lunch. "Everything okay, man?" he asked, setting his sandwich down. "You've been quiet all day." I hesitated, unsure of how much to share. Marcus and I had known each other since college, and he was the closest thing I had to a confidant. Still, voicing my concerns out loud felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready to approach. "Just a rough night," I said finally, brushing it off. "Couldn't sleep." He raised an eyebrow but didn't push. "Well, if you need to talk, you know where to find me." The truth was, I didn't even know where to start. My thoughts were scattered, a tangled mess of doubt and paranoia. Was I overreacting? Was the late-night call innocent, just a misinterpreted conversation? Or was it something worse? That evening, I decided to keep a closer eye on Olivia, not out of malice, but because I needed answers. When she came home, I greeted her as usual, trying to mask the unease bubbling beneath the surface. She kissed me on the cheek, her lips warm and familiar, but there was a subtle distance in her touch that I couldn't ignore. "How was work?" I asked as she slipped off her heels. "Busy," she replied, heading toward the bedroom to change. "I've got a big presentation coming up, so everyone's a little stressed." Her explanation sounded plausible enough, but I couldn't help noticing how quickly she changed the subject when I pressed for details. It was as though she didn't want me to dig too deep. After dinner, Olivia retreated to the living room with her laptop, claiming she needed to prepare slides for her presentation. I watched her from the kitchen, sipping a beer and pretending to read an article on my phone. She was absorbed in her work, or at least she appeared to be. Every so often, she glanced at her phone, her expression unreadable. Later that night, as she showered, I found myself standing in front of her phone on the counter. It was locked, of course. Olivia had always been cautious with her privacy, and while I'd never questioned it before, now it felt like a barrier I needed to break through. Her passcode wasn't something I could guess easily. It wasn't her birthday, the year we got married, or anything else obvious. Frustration welled up inside me as I set the phone back down, feeling both guilty and defeated. I decided to focus on what I could do instead. I started paying more attention to her routines, her habits, and, most importantly, her behavior around her phone. Over the next few days, I noticed patterns I hadn't registered before. How she kept her phone face down on the table, how she would step out of the room to take certain calls, and how her mood seemed to shift depending on who she was messaging. Each new detail added another layer to my growing suspicion, and yet, despite my attempts to stay calm and rational, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn into something far bigger than I realized. One evening, when she went out for drinks with her coworkers, I decided to take a calculated risk. I had a few hours alone, and I intended to make the most of them. While Olivia was out, I searched the house for anything that might give me a clue about what she was hiding. It felt wrong, like a violation of the trust we'd built over the years, but my need for answers outweighed my guilt. I started with the obvious places, her desk, her nightstand, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Then, while rummaging through a drawer in the living room, I came across a small black notebook tucked beneath a stack of old magazines. My pulse quickened as I opened it, expecting to find work notes or a to-do list. What I found instead stopped me cold. The pages were filled with dates and times, all written in Olivia's neat handwriting. Some entries had short, cryptic notes beside them. 9 p.m., important. After work, discuss options, avoid questions. There was no context, no explanation, but it was enough to make my heart race. I stared at the notebook, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't proof of anything, At least not yet, but it was the first tangible sign that something was happening behind my back. And whatever it was, Olivia was going to great lengths to keep it hidden. When she came home that night, smiling and slightly tipsy, I couldn't look at her the same way. The warmth in her voice, the ease in her laughter, it all felt like a mask, a carefully crafted facade designed to keep me in the dark. I knew then that I couldn't let this go. I had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. The black notebook haunted me. Every time I thought about it, my chest tightened with a mix of anger, confusion, and fear. I kept it hidden under my side of the bed, knowing Olivia rarely looked there. I wasn't sure what to do next, but I knew I couldn't confront her. Not yet. If I did, I risked her shutting down completely or finding a way to cover her tracks. I needed more information. The next few days were a blur of quiet observation. I felt like a stranger in my own home, tiptoeing around Olivia and pretending everything was fine. She, on the other hand, seemed as composed as ever. If she suspected anything, she didn't show it. Then on a Friday evening, something unexpected happened. Olivia had gone out again, this time for what she claimed was a networking event with clients. I stayed behind, feigning disinterest, but as soon as she was out the door, I sprang into action. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but desperation had taken hold. I remembered that Olivia's laptop was synced to her email. If she had any incriminating messages, they might still be there. I booted it up, praying she hadn't changed her password. To my relief, her login was saved, and within seconds I was scrolling through her inbox. Most of the emails were work-related, just as I expected. But as I scrolled further, I noticed a name that popped up several times. Evan C. The messages were sparse, just a handful over the past month. But something about their tone set off alarm bells. One email sent 2 weeks ago read, "Subject, can't stop thinking about it. From Evan C. to Olivia G. You looked incredible the other night. I still can't believe we pulled that off without anyone noticing. Let me know when we can talk again. I need to hear your voice." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. The message was short, vague, but unmistakably intimate. My mind raced as I tried to connect the dots. Who was Evan? Was he a coworker? A client? And what had they pulled off? I clicked on another email, sent just a few days ago. Subject, tonight I'll be waiting. Usual time. My stomach churned. Usual time. It sounded so calculated, like this wasn't their first rendezvous. The pieces were falling into place, but I still didn't have the whole picture. I needed to know more. I went back to the notebook, flipping through the pages again. Sure enough, several of the dates matched emails from Evan. The entries didn't offer much detail, but they lined up too perfectly to be a coincidence. When Olivia came home later that night, I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch a late-night talk show. She breezed through the door, her hair slightly mussed and her cheeks flushed. "How was the event?" I asked, my voice as neutral as I could make it. She smiled, dropping her purse onto the counter. "Good. Long but productive. Meet anyone interesting?" "Just the usual crowd," she replied, her tone casual. "A lot of schmoozing. You know how it is." I nodded, trying to ignore the anger bubbling beneath the surface. She kissed me goodnight and headed to bed, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The way she lied so effortlessly made my stomach turn. I'd always admired her ability to stay calm under pressure, but now it felt like a weapon she was using against me. The next morning, I decided it was time to involve someone else. As much as I hated airing my dirty laundry, I couldn't handle this alone anymore. I called Marcus and asked him to meet me for coffee. When we sat down at our usual spot, he could tell right away that something was wrong. "All right," he said, leaning forward. "Spill it." I hesitated for a moment, then told him everything. The late-night phone call, the notebook, the emails. As I spoke, Marcus's expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief. "Jesus, man," he said when I finished. "That's heavy. Are you sure about this Evan guy? I mean, it could be something innocent, right?" I shook my head. "I don't think so. The emails don't read like something innocent. And the notebook? It all adds up." Marcus frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. "So what's the plan? You can't just sit on this forever." "I know," I said, running a hand through my hair. "But I need more proof. something concrete. If I confront her now, she'll deny everything. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then leaned closer. You know what you need to do? Track her. If she's meeting this guy in person, you can follow her. See where she goes. The idea sent a chill down my spine, but I knew he was right. It was risky, but it might be the only way to get the answers I needed. I spent the rest of the weekend preparing, studying her routines and figuring out the best way to follow her without being noticed. On Monday evening, the opportunity finally came. Olivia told me she had another work dinner and wouldn't be home until late. I acted casual, wishing her a good night as she left. The moment the door closed, I grabbed my keys and followed her. My heart pounded as I trailed her car at a safe distance. She drove across town, eventually pulling into the parking lot of a boutique hotel. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I watched her get out of the car, smoothing her dress and glancing at her phone. She wasn't alone for long. A man emerged from the lobby, tall, dark-haired, with a confident stride. Even from a distance, I recognized him. Evan. My blood ran cold as I watched them greet each other. Olivia smiled, leaning in for a hug that lingered too long to be friendly. They exchanged a few words before disappearing inside together. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was real, and I wasn't ready for what came next. I sat in my car, frozen, staring at the entrance of the boutique hotel where Olivia and Evan had just disappeared. My mind raced, trying to process what I just witnessed. A part of me had hoped that this would all turn out to be some misunderstanding, that my suspicions were nothing more than paranoia. But now there was no denying the truth staring me in the face. For the next few minutes, I remained parked, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Every instinct screamed at me to follow them inside, to demand answers, to confront her and Evan on the spot. But another part of me, the cooler and more calculating side, knew that storming in without a plan would only end in disaster. Instead, I grabbed my phone and took a few photos of Olivia and Evan entering the hotel. They weren't definitive proof of an affair, at least not yet, but they were a start. I would need more if I wanted the full truth. The next hour was one of the longest of my life. I waited in the car, alternating between rage and despair as I replayed the events of the past few weeks. The late-night calls, the cryptic emails, the notebook, it all led to this moment. I thought about our marriage, the life we'd built together, and the idea that it could all be a lie. The thought was unbearable, yet here I was, living it. When Olivia and Evan finally reappeared, it was nearly midnight. They exited the hotel side by side, their expressions relaxed and carefree. Evan leaned in, saying something that made Olivia laugh. The sound of her laughter, once so comforting to me, now felt like a dagger to the heart. I watched as they walked to their cars, parked a few spaces apart. Olivia got into hers first, and Evan lingered for a moment, watching her drive away before heading to his own vehicle. My mind was screaming with questions. What had they been doing? Was this the first time? How long had this been going on? I followed Olivia home, keeping a safe distance to avoid raising suspicion. By the time she pulled into the driveway, I had managed to compose myself, at least on the outside. When she walked through the front door, I was already sitting on the couch, pretending to be engrossed in a movie. "You're up late," she said, setting her purse down on the kitchen counter. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, glancing at her briefly before turning my attention back to the screen. "How was dinner?" She hesitated just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough for me to notice. "It was fine," she said, forcing a smile. "The usual work stuff." "Sounds exhausting," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Inside, I was screaming. "It was," she said with a small laugh. "I'm going to head to bed. See you in the morning?" "Yeah," I said, watching as she disappeared down the hallway. The moment her bedroom door closed, I felt the weight of my emotions crash over me. I stayed on the couch for hours, unable to move. I thought about confronting her right then and there, demanding answers. But I knew that if I did, she would lie. She was too skilled at keeping up appearances, too practiced at hiding the truth. If I wanted her to admit what she was doing, I needed undeniable proof. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. My first stop was the hotel where I'd seen them. I parked outside and watched the comings and goings of the guests, hoping to spot some clue or pattern that could give me more information. It felt like grasping at straws, but I couldn't just sit at home, waiting for the next opportunity to catch her. After a few hours, I decided to go inside. Posing as a potential customer, I approached the front desk and struck up a conversation with the receptionist. I asked about their rates, amenities, and whether they offered any private meeting rooms. The receptionist, a young woman with a bright smile, answered my questions cheerfully, but I could tell she wasn't going to divulge anything about Olivia or Evan. As I walked back to my car, frustration boiled inside me. My instincts told me that whatever was happening between Olivia and Evan wasn't just a casual fling. There was something calculated about the way they were meeting, something that felt rehearsed. I needed to know who Evan was, why he was in her life, and how far this betrayal went. That evening, I decided to confront Marcus. I hadn't told him about the hotel yet, but I needed someone to help me piece this puzzle together. When I showed him the photos, his reaction was a mix of shock and anger. "Damn, Daniel," he said, shaking his head. "This is bad. I mean, you've got enough here to confront her." "Not yet," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I want to know everything first. I need to know why she's doing this, how long it's been going on, and who Evan really is." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "What can I do to help?" "Find out everything you can about Evan," I said. "His full name, where he works, anything. I need to know what kind of man he is." Over the next few days, Marcus and I worked together, piecing together the fragments of information I'd gathered. It wasn't long before we uncovered the truth. Evan Klein, a senior client from Olivia's company. He was married with 2 kids and had a reputation for being charming but manipulative. The realization hit me like a freight train. Olivia wasn't just having an affair. She was involved with someone who had just as much to lose as she did. It explained their secrecy, their careful planning, and the cryptic nature of their conversations. I stared at the information Marcus had gathered, my hands trembling. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a calculated, deliberate act. Olivia had made a choice, and now I had to decide what to do about it. The revelation about Evan Klein turned everything I thought I knew upside down. He wasn't just some anonymous fling Olivia had picked up online. He was a man she'd likely known for months, maybe even years, through her work. The fact that he was married made the betrayal feel even more deliberate. Like they were both playing a dangerous game with no regard for the collateral damage. For days, I wrestled with what to do. Every time I looked at Olivia, I saw the lies in her smile, the deceit in her casual conversations. She went about her routines as if nothing had changed, but to me, everything was different. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The weight of what I knew sat heavy in my chest, and I felt like I was suffocating under it. One night after Olivia had gone to bed, I sat in the living room with Marcus's findings spread out on the coffee table. There were photos of Evan, a copy of his LinkedIn profile, even an article about his promotion to senior client manager at a high-profile marketing firm. The more I stared at his face, the more my anger grew. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I needed to confront Olivia, but I wanted to do it in a way that left her no room to twist the narrative. She was an expert at controlling the story, at presenting herself in a way that made her seem blameless. If I didn't have undeniable evidence, she'd find a way to manipulate the situation and make me doubt my own reality. The next day, I put my plan into motion. I told Olivia I had an overnight work trip, something I occasionally did for my job as a private security consultant. She didn't question it, and by evening, I was parked a few streets away from our house waiting. Sure enough, just after 8 p.m., Olivia left the house. She was dressed casually, but her hair and makeup were done with more care than usual. I followed her at a safe distance as she drove across town, my heart pounding with every turn she made. When she pulled into the same boutique hotel as before, a sickening sense of déjà vu washed over me. This time, I didn't wait in the car. I parked discreetly and followed her inside, keeping a safe distance. She didn't notice me as she made her way to the elevators, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. My stomach churned as I watched the doors close behind her. I lingered in the lobby, debating my next move. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, my hands trembling as I clenched them into fists. Part of me wanted to storm upstairs, to kick down the door and demand answers. But another part of me, The part that had always relied on logic and strategy told me to wait. I approached the front desk, trying to keep my voice steady as I spoke to the receptionist. "Excuse me," I said, leaning on the counter. "I'm meeting my wife here, but I think I lost her in the lobby. She didn't tell me what room she's in. Can you help me out?" The receptionist hesitated, her friendly smile faltering. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give out guest information." I forced a chuckle, trying to appear casual. "I get it. Privacy and all that. Could you at least let her know I'm here? Olivia Green?" She hesitated again, then nodded. "Let me call her room and check." My heart pounded as she picked up the phone and dialed. After a few moments, she frowned and set the receiver down. "It looks like she didn't answer. Would you like me to leave her a message?" "No, that's fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Thanks for trying." I walked back to the lobby, my mind racing. Olivia had to be in the room with Evan, and the fact that she hadn't answered the call only confirmed my suspicions. I had what I needed: a location, context, and enough evidence to confront her. Now it was a matter of timing. I returned to my car and waited. An hour passed, then another, as I watched the entrance. Finally, just before midnight, Olivia emerged from the hotel with Evan at her side. They didn't seem to notice me as they walked to their cars, their heads close as they exchanged what looked like parting words. Olivia reached out to touch his arm, and I felt a surge of rage that nearly sent me out of the car. Instead, I gripped the steering wheel and forced myself to stay calm. If I confronted them now, it would be explosive, but it wouldn't give me the answers I needed. I wanted Olivia to admit what she'd done, to face the consequences without a way to deflect or deny. When Olivia got home, I was already waiting for her. She looked surprised to see me sitting at the dining table, the lights dimmed and a glass of water in my hand. "I thought you were out of town," she said, setting her keys on the counter. "I was," I said, my voice low. "Plans changed." She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. "What's going on? You look tense." I stood up, sliding my phone across the table toward her. The screen displayed one of the photos I'd taken of her and Evan entering the hotel together. Her face went pale. For a moment, she said nothing, her mouth opening and closing as if she were searching for the right words. Finally, she managed a shaky laugh. "You've been following me?" I didn't answer. I just stared at her, waiting. "Daniel," she began, her voice trembling, "this isn't what it looks like." "Then tell me what it is," I said, my tone sharp. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been lying to me for months." Her silence was deafening. The silence between us was suffocating, a canyon of words that neither of us dared to cross. Olivia sat across from me at the dining table, her face pale and streaked with tears. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I had asked her to tell me everything, and now that she had, I almost wished I hadn't. 3 months. For 3 months, the woman I had loved and trusted more than anyone had been sneaking off to see another man. Every moment we had shared during that time felt like a lie now, a cruel illusion crafted to keep me in the dark. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she had caused me. Instead, I sat there, staring at her like she was a stranger. "Why?" I asked, my voice hollow. "What did I do to deserve this?" Olivia flinched, her hands trembling as they gripped the edge of the table. "You didn't do anything wrong, Daniel," she said softly. This wasn't about you." I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and unfamiliar. "Not about me? You think that makes it better? You think that excuses sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face every single day?" She shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know it doesn't. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't take back, but it was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I ended it, Daniel. It's over." I pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. "Do you really think that changes anything? That we can just go back to the way things were because you say it's over?" She stood too, reaching for me, but I stepped away before she could touch me. "Daniel, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I love you. I never stopped loving you." I turned to face her, my anger boiling over. "You don't do this to someone you love, Olivia. You don't lie to them, cheat on them, and then come home every night pretending everything's fine. That's not love." She looked like I'd slapped her, her breath hitching as she fought back a sob. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she said, her voice trembling, but I'm asking for it anyway. Please, Daniel, don't let this destroy us. Us, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. There is no us anymore. You destroyed it the moment you decided he was worth more than our marriage. Her tears came harder now, but I couldn't find it in myself to care. I had nothing left to give her. No sympathy, no understanding, no forgiveness. The Olivia I thought I knew, the woman I had promised to spend my life with, was gone. In her place stood someone I didn't recognize, someone who had made choices that shattered everything we had built together. I can't do this, I said finally, my voice cracking. I can't stay here and pretend this didn't happen. Daniel, she whispered, her voice desperate. Please don't go. Please, we can fix this. I shook my head, my chest aching as I turned away from her. Some things can't be fixed. I grabbed my coat and keys, the weight of my decisions settling on my shoulders as I walked toward the door. Olivia's sobs followed me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. When I stepped outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap to the face. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty street, trying to steady myself. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. For the first time in my life, I felt truly lost. As I got into my car and drove away, I realized that this was the end, not just of my marriage, but of the life I had envisioned for myself. Olivia had been my partner, my confidant, my anchor. Now all of that was gone, ripped away by her betrayal. The road stretched out before me, dark and endless. I didn't know where I was going or what I would do next, but I knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back, and so I drove into the night, leaving behind the only life I'd ever known, hoping that somewhere out there I'd find the strength to start again.